Okay, so next I want to look at on collision and instancing. And what I'm going to create is a little Mario type box that if we hit it with our head, the box will disappear and a bunch of coins or a coin will fall out of it. So I'm going to need a couple of objects. I'm going to need my Mario box. Let's create a cube. Mario box. Let's give it a little bit more space. Yep, it's fine. It's from Turbo Squid. It's fine if we don't release it. This one, don't need to do anything to it. It'll work as a cube or on the cube, sort of. Terrible. Mario won't have, or Nintendo won't have a problem with this. Exactly. Okay, just make sure you can jump and run under that thing. You can hit this cube. There it is. No, we can't. Not jumpy enough. All right. Great. You can hit it. Fantastic, and nothing happens. Okay, so there's my cube. I'm going to need a prefab to instantiate, so I'm just going to make a coin. Let's add a cylinder, 3D object cylinder. I'll call it coin. A fine big coin to appear from that box. And I want a proper collider. I want it to fall like coins. This capsule collider will make it fall like a sphere. Rigid body to make it fall with physics. And I'm going to remove that capsule collider and add a mesh collider. Convex. And let's make it yellow. And I made a separate yellow so I can turn up the metallic and make it properly metal. There we go. Okay, there's our coin. I press play. It should fall and roll around. Or not. Balance perfectly. Still balanced perfectly. All right, whatever. Let's move forward. So this can be our prefab. I'm going to add an empty parent to this. Just usually good practice. So then the coin object can have 0 values. Just good practice. turn this into a prefab just by bringing it down into my prefab folder. And there it is. I can delete it from my stage because I have it down here. I can drop it anywhere I want. Prefabs. Okay, so we have our prefab. We just need the script to instantiate this thing. I'm going to add a script. I'll just call it treasure or treasure box. And in here, I'm going to access the on-collision stuff. Yeah. So we have on-collision enter, void on-collision exit. And on-collision stay. Enter the first time we register the collision. Exit, we stop colliding with the object. Stay, we're continuously standing on the collider. So maybe you had a health pad that was going to rejuvenate your health the longer you stand in this area. You have an on-collision state, then over time your health would increase unit by unit. For the platforming thing we were talking about, on collision enter, you'd make the platform the parent of the player. On collision exit, you unparent it. You don't want to keep that parenting action all the way through, just so you can translate those values. All we're going to need for this is on collision enter, and we're going to need to instantiate our prefab on collision. So first I'll need a variable for my prefab. The prefab is a game object with a capital G. I'll just give it a name of prefab. And we can load that in inside of the inspector. On collision enter, sure, I'll add debugs for all of these. Debug.log. Start collision. End collision. Staying in collision. And on entry, when we first collide, that's when we're going to instantiate our prefab. We're also going to deactivate the box. Now, I'm also going to check if this is the player that's colliding. I don't want other random objects with rigid bodies colliding. Oh, other game object tag is equal to player. Now, that's throwing up an error. I don't know why. Cool, you know? Probably hasn't been taught. Oh, that's very correct. Yes, it doesn't exist in the current context, so it's nowhere in this script. So what we're checking is if the collision object, the object colliding with the box, has the tag of player. But inside of our construction, Unity's auto-completed the name of our collision as collision. So two ways I can do this. I can rename the name, like we named our variables. I could rename that to other, and something weird happens. Other, and now it does exist in the current context because this collision enter is naming our collision as other. If I name it as call, pretty standard to do that because it's much shorter than collision, that is now broken. But I can say Call right there. I'll do it for these other ones as well for consistency. So if the other game object tag is the player, then we want to first deactivate the box game object with a lowercase g because we're referring to the object this script is on. We're not creating a new game object. Set active false. Doesn't destroy it, it deactivates it. And at the same time, we want to instantiate our coin in the same place. Instantiate. And then the name of our prefab. And then the position we want to give it is the position of the box, where the box is. So it's just transform.position. And then lastly, the rotation. Quaternion identity is just the default rotation of that object. And let's add a debug. Why not? Coin dropped. And there is all the script we need. Just that part. The rest are just there to kind of display what they do. So back to Unity. Our treasure box is here. We need a prefab. I can use my selector box. Look in my assets. There's coin parent. And now I should be able to jump around and pow, there we go. Coin dropped. Another coin, fantastic. Pow, another coin. I'm rich. And if we wanted to collect those coins, we could use a very similar process. We could set the coin to be inactive, instantiate maybe a little particle, add some score to the UI. We could also make clusters of coins like this and make them as one prefab if you wanted something a little bit more splashy. Again, another coin parent. I will say this coin parent cluster or multiple. And you can have different weights for those pickups. Oh, you found the multi-box. So, singular coin, drop one. Multiple coin, drop a couple. Rich. Rich beyond your wildest dreams. Oh, up it goes. There you go. Now, when it goes to triggers, it's much the same process. It has on trigger enter, on trigger exit, and on trigger stay. Triggers are, as we've said before, more like tripwires. In fact, this description put it better than I could have. It's just a way of using the basic collider mechanics for a different purpose. Normally, a collider collides with something, which means the objects apply a force to each other. This implies that the engine internally has to be able to detect when one collider overlaps another. Same thing is happening with a trigger, the overlap detection, or when an object has entered a particular area without activating the collision force. Most solid objects in a game are just ordinary colliders. Use a trigger when you want something reminiscent of the sensor of an automatic door or hand dryer. Now, triggers are good at detecting things, but one of the rules is one of the objects being detected, either the trigger or the object being detected, must have a rigid body on it of some kind. That rigid body could be kinematic, not using gravity, but for detection with triggers, one of them needs a rigid body. Okay, another box. This one will be our trigger box. I'm also going to create an empty. Let's give this a title right here. To act as a trigger spawn. And we're going to use this as a way to trigger traps, have things appear as we run into them. So a little tripwire. In order for this to work, it must be set as a trigger. And then when you want to hide them during the game, you just disable that mesh render so people can't see them. While testing, we usually just keep them on so we can see what the hell is happening. We got a script to the trigger box. It'll be very similar. I'll call it trigger box. And inside of it, in fact, I can copy a lot of the syntax. I need a prefab. I need an on trigger enter that's going to check for the player and then do something. So I'm going to use all of this construction. Oh, is it collider? Hmm. So it doesn't register collision, it's registering a collider, so I couldn't just rearrange that. Okay, so in this space, I am going to need a transform as a variable. For the spawn. We're not dropping a coin. And we don't need to deactivate the trigger. But we are going to instantiate a prefob. We're just not going to use the transform position of the trigger. We want to put the trap in the player's path and maybe have a bit of customization, a way of arranging where it's going to appear. Instead, we're going to use the, oh wait, no, we'll have to make a game object. Yes. Game object, spawn, and say spawn.transform position, default identity. Again, giving me an error here because the reference says other and not collider or col. I'll just update that. Now we can use the trigger script to instantiate a new trap in the player's path. And this is a repeatable structure. We can do again and again. So I'll load in my trigger spawn as my spawn point. This is where the trap's going to appear. And I can pick any of the traps that I want or obstacles. Trigger spawn. Let's say the pendulum. Why not? How tall is that pendulum usually? About there. And I'm using the V command to move this. You can snap to vertex, just to snap to specific places. Trigger spawn will be there. Fantastic. So now I can instantiate by hitting these cubes. Big coin. There's a trigger up there. I hope I don't trip it. Oh dear, there's my triggered element. Terrifying. Oh, and 2 of them, and 3, and 4. Because we're not deactivating the trigger. Do you want that to happen? Who knows? Makes it harder. And I'm down lower. I've just made an empty parent. I'm going to call this pendulum dropper. So my 2 elements are just under that parent, just so I can duplicate and make a lot of traps. Control D, move along. Control D, move along. Control D, move along. Control D, move along. And now we have a pendulum. Another pendulum. A pendulum. It's a pendulum. What's next? A pendulum? Oh dear. And the pendulums are knocking me into the triggers with more pendulums. The chaos. The chaos. And do they all have to be pendulums? Absolutely not. Just get into the trigger box of each one and pick a different obstacle. What about a giant ball? A ball could drop. What about for this one? We have movable wall. Why not? For this one, a fall platform wouldn't be very good. Checkpoint, rotating platform, rotation X. A rotator, why not? Ooh, I hope I haven't messed up that script too badly. And the last one, another ball, because we know every time you hit it, another ball is going to drop. Extra balls. And finally, what is left? I don't know. Yeah, leave that as pendulum. Great. Disable all of those mesh renders, so they're there, but they're not. And now suddenly we have conflict. Oh, oh dear. Oh, my mustache saved me. Oh no. Definitely a feature, the mustache. Oh, it's chaos. Oh, it's up there. Not good. Oh no. The coins. God. So you can see how with a little bit of creativity and a little bit of malignance, you know, the universe out to get you, employ that in your game. It's all conflict stopping you from reaching that objective. Oh, and there's that rotator. Terrifying. Wow. So the magic of triggers, the magic of instancing. And finally, the final thing, you'll notice he has a little movement animation. It's his hat moving up and down as he walks, and it doesn't play as he's not walking. So, what we have here is a little state machine right here. I've got two animations. Oh, I can't see. No model is available. Yes, it is. Here it is. So this is the player idle. He's not moving at all. But even though there is no movement at all, in order for the state machine to transition between a walking state and an idle state, we need to create an animation for it, an animation clip. So even though there's nothing happening here, I need to create the animation. For player moving, it's literally just his hat moving up and down. So let me delete those and that. Actually, no, we'll make a new state machine. Okay, so the way to create this animation is first we need to create two animations. Go to Window, Animation, and you'll see this little timeline right here. And I already have a clip loaded up, but you'll need to create a new clip. By default, it's going to ask you to create a new clip with an animator as well. In fact, I should just delete. I should just delete it. Yeah. Okay, I'll deleted everything, so now he has no animation on him. I'll just nest this window down here. So what you'll see when you open up any object you want to animate, it'll say to begin animating player, create an animation clip. We'll have to do that. So here's my first animation, player idle. In order to add some animation, we need to click the record button. And then we need to decide what property we're going to animate. I'm just going to say transform position of the whole player. And I'm not going to make any changes whatsoever. I'll keep that as a standard, no movement idle. First animation, done. Easy. Let's create another clip for his walking. Player moving. And here I animated his hat. So his hat is an object which helpfully I've named hat. So when I add property, you'll see in the list, there's literally everything that is there as children of the player can be animated. It can all be animated separately. So I just want to animate the hat. I'm going to go down to hat 1. We can animate it is active, on or off. I'm going to say its position and rotation are two things I want to animate. So I'll add position. And add rotation. Again, I'll turn on record mode, so it will record all my keyframe changes. This is just auto key mode. You can insert animation keyframes that way, but I'll just do the easy way. And then I move on, let's say the center, grab his hat, I pull it up, and now his hat is moving up and down and up and down. And I can do more with the rotation. And good animation tips. Go a little bit backwards before you go forward. And as we're getting up to the end here, push it a little bit further. A bit further. Yeah, not the best. Yeah, a bit too much. But of course, you can refine as much as you want. Oh, maybe you should just do a whole flip. Up and up and all the way around. There, perfect. Great animation. We're done. Okay, that animation's in the bag. Fantastic. So in the project, we've created our two animations. There they are. We also have the state machine that we can open up for the player. Let's open that up. And you see it already has our two animations in here. Player moving, player idle. And what I need for the script to trigger this is I need a parameter, almost like an if condition, to say when are we going to transition to each state. So in parameters, I'm just going to say a bool, true or false. Are we walking? Are we not? True or false bool. I will name it is walking. And then on entry, when we start the game, we're going to go to player idle and start there. That's fine. That's what we want. Then I'm just going to use the any state command. So from any of the other states, make a transition by right clicking. And on the transition, I select it. It's going to ask for a condition. Transition needs a condition or an exit time to be valid. Otherwise, it'll be ignored. We have a condition. Is he walking? True or false? Add the condition. If we're going to the idle, is he walking? True or false? False. Correctamundo. 4 billion points. Transition again to player moving. Is he walking? Yes or no? Yes, he is. True. Some other little settings that can cause issues that I recommend you change in your settings here is the can transition to self. It can cause issues with a lot of animations. I generally just uncheck it out of superstition. And then we have the transition duration. That's how long it's going to take to transition from the idle into the moving state. And there it is, transitioning between that to the idle. Very hard to tell. And then that's our state machine set up. We have conditions for it to change. We just need one line of code to trigger this off. So we need to do this on the player's script because that's where it's doing all the movement control stuff. So I'm just going to open up character controls. And for this one, we're going to check when they're moving. We have an if statement that says we can move in fixed update, and I've already added the line. We have to get the component of the animator that's on the player and set the bool is walking to true, or else we set it to false. So by using get component, I'm accessing a component that's on the player because this script is on the player. Since we were animating the player already, we have an animator controller that was added. And it's got our player controller. It's already there. And just with these two scripts, just get component, autocomplete, angle brackets, animator, open and close brackets, and then there's set bool, set float, and set trigger, because these are all different types of parameter we can add in here. So they're named as they sound. Set bool, set int, set trigger. In this case, we used a bool, set bool, give the string name as we spelt it, is walking. Oh, did I spell it with a capital or not? Always good to know. It's going to be true while we're moving and false while we're not. Let me check. How did I name that? Oh, I did lowercase. So, is walking lowercase. So, if we're moving, trigger it. If we're not, don't. Back in Unity, there's my little flippy hat. And here's my Gauntlet of Pain. Bonk. Wonderful. Ah, yes. And that one, obviously, that's why I made the transform as an empty. We can position where it's going to spawn. That should be positioning down there. Obviously not in the air. Same with the rotator. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. So I can go back through my trigger boxes. Look for the one that's triggering the... Oh, rotator is one. Sphere is one. There we go. Movable wall trigger is right here. I can grab that trigger spawn and just bring it down. Oh, and use my vector. Snap right to the vector. Nice. And there it is. It's appeared right there. Still not doing damage, but at least it's affecting the player. Rich. Oof. And then to wrap it up, make one final build. Main menu. Oh yes, the lights were off in my main menu. So before I make a build, I'm just going to make sure there are lights. Yeah, it's very dark. Okay. New folder. Build. Seamus. V3. Still the 6th of the 1224. And I should probably change the name of my Unity project to, what did you say, Parkour, whatever? Oh yeah, Bean Parkour. Well, there we go. This is kind of working. I can press start and, ooh, lighting changes. Again, things to figure out. I think it might have inherited the light I just created for the main menu and brought it over. Oh, death. Oh, dear. Oh, yes, and one other thing we could do is add a menu button here, a little UI canvas to take us back. Exact same thing, it's just scene management, brings back the other way. It's the same as the start button, I mean, it's just next to it in the corner. Whew. I will stop the